Welcome to Midnight Mysteries. If you feel like listening to a horror story, you're in the right place. The daylight was almost gone when I decided to take that back road, cutting through the dense forest of northern Arizona. I had heard about the Navajo myths. These were stories that had always seemed distant from my urban reality, tales of creatures called Skinwalkers, evil sorcerers who can transform into animals. I had never believed these legends until that evening. I found myself driving along an old road, intending to reach Page before it got completely dark. The road was poorly lit, and the trees formed a natural tunnel above me, their branches seemingly scratching the orange sunset sky. An unusual cold for that season forced me to turn up the car's heating while an unsettling wind began to blow through the leaves. I wasn't the type to scare easily, but that wind carried sounds I couldn't explain, giving me a sense of oppression. It was a mix of howls and whispers, as if the forest itself had begun to speak. I decided to turn on the radio to cover those noises, but I couldn't find a station that worked properly. Every station the tuner found lasted only for a few meters before being replaced by that annoying static noise. I haven't mentioned it yet, but it wasn't the first time I had taken that road, and it wasn't even the first time I had gone exactly in that direction and passed through those places. So these strange sensations and the radio malfunction were completely new phenomena I had never experienced before. I decided to continue. We were almost at sunset when I saw a figure suddenly cross the road just a few meters ahead of me. I braked sharply. A large deer, with intensely expressive eyes, stopped to look at me before disappearing again into the dense forest on the other side of the road. My heartbeat quickened. What a strange feeling. There was something in that animal's eyes that left me puzzled. I would almost say they were human eyes, but I can't think of a term to describe them, but I'm sure you understand what I mean. Anyway, I resumed driving, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. I looked at the clock, 7:43 p.m. It should have still been light. Yet it seemed as if the night had swallowed the forest in an instant. Shortly after, the car's engine started acting up. I sighed, frustrated, as the car completely shut off, leaving me at the mercy of a darkness that now seemed alive and pulsating. With a sigh of resignation, I opened the door to check the engine, but a sharp cold pierced me as soon as I stepped out. The sound of my boots on the asphalt seemed excessively loud in that almost total silence. As I approached the hood, a sense of danger struck me. The wind picked up again, bringing with it a sweet and rotting smell. Today I would say it was almost a smell of death, but at that moment, I sincerely just wanted to find a way to restart that damn engine and get away from there as soon as possible. Terror gripped me when, looking up towards the forest, I felt I saw eyes reflecting the car's headlights. At that point, an inner voice shouted at me to get back in the car immediately. I followed my instinct, jumped inside, and closed the door just in time to hear something scratch the metal on the opposite side. My heart was pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears as I desperately tried to restart that damn engine. With a jolt of relief, the engine came back to life, and I pressed the accelerator without looking back. I was shaken, sweaty, and terrified, and at that moment, I knew only one thing. I had to get away from that place as quickly as possible. As I sped away, the tension didn't diminish. The car seemed to move in jerks, as if something or someone was still there, just out of sight, following me. Occasionally, I glanced in the rearview mirror, fearing to see those glowing eyes staring at me once again from the darkness. After a few kilometers, the forest seemed to thin out, and the tension slowly began to ease. I soon realized, however, that I was lost. I had probably missed some turn and, just to escape, had driven straight ahead. The road was not as familiar as it should have been, and I began frankly to go a bit paranoid. Amidst the commotion, I had left the radio on, and suddenly, after transmitting only static, it began to capture fragmented transmissions. A hoarse, almost incomprehensible voice spoke in a language I couldn't identify, speaking hypnotically and occasionally interrupted by static again. I turned off the radio as the feeling of being pursued intensified once more. I decided I had to stop, at least to try to orient myself with the phone's GPS. I found a clearing to park and, with trembling hands, took the phone from the glove compartment. No signal. It was impossible. I had never had reception problems in that area. I tried to calm myself, breathing deeply, but the external silence was so absolute that every breath sounded like thunder. As soon as I got out of the car to look for a higher point where I might catch a signal, I felt the ground vibrate under my feet. It was a dull, regular sound, like heavy footsteps approaching. Panic. I looked around, but saw nothing moving. However, the sense of a presence was there, palpable like the cold biting my skin. I stood still, trying to pinpoint the direction from which the sounds were coming. Then, a piercing scream tore through the air, and a sound mixed between human and animal froze my blood. Run. My instinct pushed me to return to the car. As soon as I closed the door, something hit the roof of the car with such force that I later found a visible dent. With my heart pounding in my throat, I restarted the engine and accelerated again. Looking back through the rearview mirror, I glimpsed the figure that had been following me. It was tall, slender, with pale skin stretched over a body that seemed a hybrid between a man and a beast. Its expression was twisted into a grin that promised nothing good. Then it disappeared as I took the first turn that lay ahead. But the terror remained, a constant companion as I tried to extricate myself from the forest's grip. My attempts to escape turned into a real nightmare. The road twisted in front of me, now surrounded by trees that seemed to close in behind me as I passed. Before leaving that afternoon, I hadn't checked the fuel because I hadn't planned on driving all that unnecessary distance, and now it was visibly decreasing. With resignation, I realized that I couldn't keep driving indefinitely. I had to find shelter, at least for the night. Perhaps, with daylight, things would seem less terrible, and I could find my way back to civilization. Eventually, after what seemed like an eternity of twists and turns, I spotted an old motel along the road, its partially lit sign promising a decidedly decrepit hospitality. Motel Starlight, it announced with faded letters and a neon star that flickered weakly. The parking lot was completely deserted, which didn't surprise me given the place and the hour. I entered the reception area, which was also completely empty. Behind the counter, a bell waited to be rung. I did so, and the sound seemed incredibly loud in the oppressive silence of the place. After a few moments, a figure emerged from the shadow of a back door. It was an old man, with skin marked by time and eyes too tired for that late hour. "Skinwalkers travel by night," he said in a hoarse voice, as if he had read my thoughts or seen the terror on my face. I hadn't mentioned the creature, nor had I said a word about my encounter. His comment froze me on the spot. He nodded slowly, as if understanding my silence. He handed me a room key and warned me not to go out until dawn for any reason in the world. My rational mind desperately tried to dismiss the superstitions, but after what I had experienced, I could only nod silently and head to the room I had been assigned. The room was modest and slightly damp, with a musty smell that hit me as soon as I entered. I checked that the door and windows could be locked. Then, exhausted, I collapsed onto the bed. Despite the fatigue, sleep seemed distant and unreachable. The sounds of the night were different here, more bearable compared to the terror I had felt in the forest, but the fear of what could be out there remained constantly with me. I got up to drink some water, and as I approached the window, curiosity got the better of me. I slightly opened the curtain to look outside. The parking lot was shrouded in almost total darkness, but not enough to prevent me from seeing the tall, slender figure slowly crossing the yard with movements that were anything but human. With a leap back, I closed the curtain. My heart was pounding. Who knows if I was truly safe in that room? The night was long, and I knew I would spend it awake. The night passed in a state of intermittent wakefulness, where the line between dream and reality blurred and confused. Every noise made me jump, and more than once I found myself sitting on the bed, staring into the darkness, trying to distinguish real sounds from imaginary ones. I felt that external presence as if it were something weighing on my stomach, as if I sensed that creature was patiently waiting for the right moment. With the approach of dawn, a gray and foggy light began to seep through the gaps in the curtains. I got up slowly, my body aching from the tension and lack of real rest. The air was cold and damp as I prepared to leave the relative safety of the room. Before opening the door, I listened carefully, trying to detect any suspicious sounds. Hearing only silence, I ventured outside. The parking lot, now shrouded in a thick morning fog, looked like a completely different world from what I had observed through the window the previous evening. I cautiously made my way to the reception, hoping to find the old man and maybe get some answers. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open. The interior was silent and deserted, as if no one had ever been there. I left $50 on the counter, exited the motel, filled my car with gas, and drove off quickly, determined to find a way out of that absurd place. The fog was slowly lifting, but the landscape that unfolded was anything but reassuring, and despite driving at a fast pace, the tension grew inside me. The road seemed endless, and every time I looked back, the fog behind me seemed to fill with furtive movements. My mind, worn out by fear, began to give in, seeing threats in every gust of wind and indistinct shape. The road led me to a fork, and I had to make a choice. I could either follow what seemed to be the main road, which presumably would take me out of the forest, or risk taking a path that seemed to cut right through the forest, presumably to shorten the route, but who knows at what cost at this point. As I considered the options, a noise behind me made me turn abruptly. There, in the fog that was slowly lifting, I saw that unsettling figure standing in the middle of the road again. For moments that seemed like minutes, I remained paralyzed. Then I made my decision and sped off. We've reached the end of this story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I invite you to let me know by adding a like and a comment below this video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news.